We celebrate the greats, the flawless blockbusters, the billion-dollar spectacles, the legends that seem destined to succeed. But hidden beneath that polished surface lies another story. A story of chaos, failure, and impossible odds. Some action movies weren't built to triumph, they were built to collapse. And somehow, they didn't. Hollywood runs on formulas. The same stars, the same arcs, the same explosions, timed to the same music. But every once in a while, something breaks through. A film too strange, too risky, too underfunded to fit the mold. It's made in garages, back alleys, foreign studios, and forgotten corners of the industry. Shot with borrowed cameras, edited on laptops. Powered by obsession rather than money. What happens when you strip away the safety nets? When passion replaces perfection? Sometimes, the result is chaos. But sometimes, it's history. The films you're about to see weren't supposed to exist. Some were laughed out of boardrooms. Others were sabotaged by their own creators. A few were just experiments that spiraled out of control. Yet each one, through accident or defiance, found something real raw nerve, broken rhythm, lightning in a bottle. They didn't just survive the system, they shattered it. They weren't polished, they were alive. And that made all the difference. So tonight, we open the vault of cinematic miracles, the 15 action movies that shouldn't have worked, but did. Fact 1. El Mariachi, 1992. How far would you go to make your first movie? For Robert Rodriguez, the answer was simple. He sold his own blood. At 23, he was just another dreamer in Texas with no money, no equipment, and no connections. Hollywood didn't care, so he made his own Hollywood. Volunteering for paid medical experiments, he scraped together $7,000 to fund a story about a wandering musician caught in a world of guns and mistaken identity. There was no crew, only friends. No permits, only luck. He shot El Mariachi with a borrowed camera, used locals as actors, and edited the footage by hand. The special effects? Balloons, condoms, and squibs rigged with fishing line. Every frame was survival. It should have disappeared. A dusty VHS collecting shelf rot. But fate had other plans. A Columbia Pictures executive saw the tape and recognized something Hollywood had forgotten: energy. The raw pulse of storytelling. El Mariachi exploded into the American indie scene, turning a backyard project into a cinematic phenomenon. Rodriguez didn't just break the rules, he proved you never needed them in the first place. What began as a medical experiment became a creative experiment that changed everything. And somewhere else, another young filmmaker was about to do the same, with even less. Fact #2. Mad Max 1979. Before The Wasteland existed on film, it existed inside George Miller's mind, a fever dream of twisted metal and burnt skies. With only $350,000 to his name, Miller, a former emergency room doctor, set out to make a movie about speed, violence, and the death of civilization. But nothing about Mad Max was civilized. Cars were borrowed from scrapyards. The crew was unpaid. Stunts were performed on real highways without permission. Mel Gibson wasn't a star yet. He was just a student who happened to look dangerous. The chaos behind the camera mirrored the chaos within the story. Real crashes, real fire, real danger. The film felt alive because it was alive, barely contained. Feral, unpredictable. When it premiered, audiences didn't see an Australian oddity. They saw the future. Mad Max became one of the most profitable films ever made, turning $350,000 into over $100 million, and redefining what action could look like outside Hollywood. The irony? The US distributors thought Australian accents sounded too strange, so they redubbed every line. Even so, the madness couldn't be silenced. From that moment, George Miller didn't just build a world, he built a myth. And soon, another filmmaker would build one too, inside a single building, one floor at a time. Fact #3. The Raid, Redemption, 2011. It started as a test, a warm-up, just a small-scale project to practice shooting fight scenes. But the Raid became a war. Fact #3. The Raid, Redemption, 2011. Shot on a shoestring budget, the film turned confinement into choreography. Each hallway became a battlefield, each wall a weapon. The actors weren't stars, they were stuntmen. The sound of fists replaced dialogue. The camera danced through chaos, never blinking. For 7 days, they filmed a single stairwell fight, every movement rehearsed, every hit real enough to bruise. No CGI, no wires, just precision, pain, and rhythm. When The Raid premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, critics called it pure adrenaline. Hollywood tried to remake it. but no imitation could capture its heartbeat. Shot on a shoestring budget, the film turned confinement into choreography. Each hallway became a battlefield, each wall a weapon. The actors weren't stars, they were stuntmen. The sound of fists replaced dialogue. The camera danced through chaos, never blinking. For 7 days, they filmed a single stairwell fight, every movement rehearsed, every hit real enough to bruise. No CGI, no wires, just precision, pain, and rhythm. Fact #4. John Wick, 2014. Revenge is an old story, but no one expected John Wick to tell it like a ballet soaked in blood. By 2014, Keanu Reeves had become a Hollywood ghost, known, respected, but forgotten. His box office days were gone. Then a script arrived, a retired hitman avenging his dead dog. It sounded absurd. Studios laughed. Reeves didn't. He joined forces with 2 former stunt coordinators, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, men who had never directed a feature. What they lacked in experience, they made up for in precision. They reinvented how to shoot violence, long takes, clean frames, flawless rhythm. They called it gun fu. Reeves trained for months in judo and jiu-jitsu, drilling until every reload, every throw, every bullet had grace. The story was simple, but the movement, poetic. The film's world was strange. Assassins paying with gold coins, hotel sanctuaries, codes of loyalty and death. It shouldn't have worked, but audiences fell in love with the myth, not the logic. John Wick became a phenomenon, not just a comeback, but a resurrection. The dog may have died, but Keanu didn't. And years before that, another lone warrior had survived something just as impossible, a story that refused to die. Fact #5. First Blood, 1982. Before the sequels, before the slogans, First Blood wasn't about glory, it was about pain. The story of John Rambo wasn't born from power fantasies, but from trauma. The Vietnam War had ended, but for Rambo, it never did. Hollywood didn't know how to handle that. For a decade, the script floated from studio to studio, rewritten 26 times, rejected by everyone from Pacino to McQueen. When Sylvester Stallone finally took it, he didn't just act, he rewrote the film. The original ending had Rambo pulling the trigger on himself. Stallone refused. He believed the soldier had earned survival, not pity. That decision changed everything. The movie turned out lean, brutal, and emotionally raw. There were no catchphrases, no excess, just one man hunted in his own country. First Blood shocked critics with its restraint and intensity. Audiences didn't see a superhero. They saw a scarred human being pushed too far. It worked because it wasn't meant to, because it told the truth about violence without glorifying it. And the twist? The studio hated the first cut so much, they almost shelved it entirely. But the audience knew better. They made Rambo immortal. Next came a film about a bus that couldn't stop and a director who wouldn't either. Fact #6. Speed, 1994. A bus, a bomb, a rule so simple it sounded stupid. If it slows down, it explodes. That was the premise of Speed. Hollywood nearly laughed it out of the room. Too small, they said, too ridiculous. But director Jean Debon, a cinematographer making his debut, saw clarity in madness. He turned minimalism into momentum. Keanu Reeves, fresh off Point Break, insisted on stripping away one-liners, leaving only focus and fear. Sandra Bullock, then unknown, brought heart to the chaos. And the action? Practical, physical, relentless. The highway jump scene, a bus flying over a missing freeway, wasn't CGI. It really happened. The crew built a hidden ramp, held their breath, and launched the bus. The reaction on Bullock's face wasn't acting, it was pure shock. When Speed hit theaters, it didn't just succeed, it detonated. Every sequence was tension in motion, proving simplicity can outpace spectacle. Ironically, the studio nearly released it without music. The score, written 2 weeks before premiere, became the pulse of the entire film. What should have been a straight-to-video thriller became an action classic. And soon after, an older man with a quiet voice would bring vengeance back to life. Fact #7. Taken 2008. Sometimes, reinvention comes from resignation. When Taken began production, Liam Neeson was 56. Hollywood had already typecast him as the wise mentor, the tragic father, the man who dies so someone else can live. Nobody expected him to punch his way into a new era of action cinema. The film was modest, a French production, shot quickly, written by Luc Besson. No studio hype, no big effects, just a father chasing his daughter's kidnappers through the streets of Paris. The story was predictable. The performance wasn't. Neeson gave Brian Mills a terrifying calm. Every punch felt precise, every line sharpened like a knife. But what made Taken unforgettable was a single phone call, 18 seconds, that redefined menace. "I will look for you, I will find you, and I will kill you." Those words became an internet anthem, a meme, a mantra. What should have been forgettable became immortal. The film grossed $226 million and birthed a subgenre, the middle-aged revenge thriller. Neeson never planned to become an action star again, but destiny doesn't ask, it kidnaps you. And in another corner of the genre, a story about death on repeat was learning how to live. Fact Hashite, Edge of Tomorrow, 2014. Few titles have ever doomed a movie faster. Edge of Tomorrow sounded like a romance novel, not an alien war epic, but inside that poor marketing was a masterpiece waiting to be discovered. Based on a Japanese novella, the film followed Major William Cage Tom Cruise as he dies and relives the same day endlessly. Forced to learn through repetition, Cruise, once known for playing indestructible heroes, now had to die hundreds of times. Emily Blunt transformed into the cold, battle-hardened Rita Vrataski, a soldier forged from loss. Their chemistry was electric but not romantic. It was built on exhaustion, on the futility of war, on learning to fight smarter, not harder. The irony? The studio didn't know how to sell it. Posters were confusing, trailers unclear. Audiences skipped it until word of mouth resurrected it. Fans discovered something profound beneath the exosuits and explosions, a meditation on failure, resilience, and rebirth. When the Blu-ray was released, it was retitled Live, Die, Repeat. The tagline became the real title. Sometimes, even names can get a second chance. But one movie didn't need second chances. It rewrote cinema in one shot. Fact #9. The Matrix, 1999. Reality bent, bullets slowed, and cinema split in two. When The Matrix arrived, no one understood it. The Wachowskis were young and untested. Their script was dense with philosophy, mythology, and technology. A studio exec reportedly asked, "What is The Matrix?" And even after production, still didn't know. Keanu Reeves, cast as Neo, spent 4 months training in wire fu and kung fu choreography before a single scene was shot. The Wachowskis built their world brick by brick, a fusion of cyberpunk despair, anime, aesthetics, and existential dread. The studio hesitated, cutting the original budget in half. The directors spent what little they had on one sequence, the lobby shootout, to prove what they could do. That gamble earned them full control. Then came the moment that changed visual storytelling forever. Neo dodging bullets in slow motion, camera circling mid-air. Bullet time was born, and with it, a new cinematic language. When The Matrix hit theaters, audiences left questioning reality itself. Was this sci-fi, philosophy, or prophecy? It didn't just work, it detonated. And from there, action cinema could never go back to sleep. Fact #0. Crank, 2006. If chaos were an art form, Crank would be its gallery. Released in 2006, it starred Jason Statham as a hitman poisoned with a drug that will kill him the moment his heart rate drops. It wasn't a story, it was an adrenaline overdose filmed at 24 frames per second. Directors Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor shot it guerrilla style. They carried their own cameras, sometimes skating between cars to capture the madness. The editing was frantic, the humor black, the energy relentless. Logic didn't matter, physics didn't exist. Every scene screamed, "Keep moving or die." The film played like a live-action video game gone feral, complete with shaky point-of-view shots, absurd violence, and a dark comedic edge that made it impossible to look away. Critics were divided. Some called it idiotic, others saw genius in the chaos. Statham was fearless. Many of the most dangerous shots, the motorcycle rides, the rooftop leaps, were real. There was no pretending in Crank, only acceleration. The twist? A film that should have been too wild for theaters became a cult phenomenon and spawned a sequel that doubled the insanity. It was pure cinema stripped to instinct. No heartbeats, no breaks, no apologies. And then, from the chaos of motion, came a movie born out of the ashes of another's failure. Fact #9. District 9, 2009. When District 9 appeared, it wasn't the movie anyone planned to make. Peter Jackson had hired a young South African named Neil Blomkamp to direct a live-action Halo adaptation. The project collapsed before cameras rolled. But instead of walking away, Jackson handed Blomkamp $30 million and said, "Do something else." What emerged was a science fiction allegory disguised as an action film. Shot documentary style in Johannesburg, it followed Wikus van der Merwe, a bureaucrat who becomes infected with alien DNA and hunted by his own government. The lead actor, Charlton Copley, wasn't even a professional. The result was staggering. The alien visuals, created on a fraction of a blockbuster's budget, looked hyper-real. The emotion felt raw, unfiltered. It wasn't humans versus aliens, it was humans versus themselves. When District 9 premiered, it stunned audiences and earned 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. The irony? Many of its designs came directly from the dead Halo project. From a failure rose one of the most human sci-fi action stories ever made. District 9 shouldn't have existed, but it reminded the world that art thrives in ruin. And speaking of impossible visions, what if a film invited you inside the body of its hero literally? Fact Hasson 2, Hardcore Henry, 2015. What if you could be the action hero? Hardcore Henry didn't just break immersion, it erased the line between viewer and protagonist. Shot entirely in first person, it transformed cinema into a sensory assault. Every punch, every explosion, every fall was seen through Henry's eyes. Director Ilya Naishuller wasn't a veteran filmmaker, he was a Russian musician who strapped GoPro cameras to helmets and filmed stuntmen sprinting, climbing, and crashing across Moscow. It was chaos, yes, but orchestrated chaos. The story barely mattered, a silent cyborg fighting to rescue his wife. What mattered was experience the illusion of control, the exhaustion of never blinking. Most studios laughed it off. Too weird, too dizzying. But a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo brought it to life, supported by fans who wanted something truly different. When it premiered, reactions were extreme. Some walked out nauseated, others left exhilarated, but nobody forgot it. It was less a movie and more a dare test of what first-person storytelling could become. Hardcore Henry didn't play by cinematic rules, it rewrote them from inside the frame, and next, another underdog would reclaim a legend Hollywood had already buried. Fact Hasson 3, Dread, 2012. When Hollywood fails, sometimes silence brings salvation. In 1995, Judge Dredd tried to conquer the box office with Stallone, explosions, and ego. It flopped so hard, the name became a joke. 17 years later, a new version crept quietly into production. No red carpets, no press tour, just a helmet, a gun, and an uncompromising vision. Carl Urban stepped into the role and made one promise: the helmet stays on. It was a small choice, but a radical one. The film's power came from restraint. Urban's face never moved, yet his presence filled the screen. Shot in South Africa with a fraction of a blockbuster budget, Dredd leaned on brutal minimalism, dirty corridors, tight spaces, relentless pacing. The drug slow-mo turned violence into slow-motion poetry, captured on phantom cameras that made every drop of blood feel suspended in air. Critics praised it, audiences missed it. Poor marketing buried it at release, but word of mouth resurrected it later. Fans discovered Dredd the way it was meant to be found, like contraband. The irony? The film about a faceless law enforcer became the most authentic version of itself by erasing vanity. Dredd didn't roar, it endured, and soon, another film would slice through the superhero myth with nothing but a blade and a child's voice. Fact Hasson 4, Kick-Ass, 2010. Superheroes weren't supposed to bleed, until Kick-Ass made them human again. Matthew Vaughn's adaptation of Mark Millar's graphic novel was everything studios feared: violent, vulgar, and morally ambiguous. No major studio wanted it, so Vaughn did it himself, financing the movie out of pocket, betting on chaos. The story followed Dave Lazuski, an ordinary teenager who decides to become a hero with no powers, no training, and no plan. What starts as parody turns painfully real. Heroes get hurt, innocents die, violence has consequences. Then came Hit Girl, an one-year-old assassin who cursed like a sailor and fought like a god. Chloe Grace Moretz's performance was electric, horrifying, and unforgettable. The outrage was immediate. Parents protested, critics argued, audiences cheered. The film made nearly $100 million on a shoestring budget, opening the door for rated superhero films years before Deadpool or Logan. The twist? The entire cast thought it would never see theaters until audiences made it their own. Kick-Ass didn't save superheroes. It exposed them. And finally, we returned to one man who couldn't escape his legend, no matter how hard he tried. Fact Hasson 5, Rambo, Last Blood, 2019. Every saga ends, but legends don't know how to die. When Rambo, Last Blood was announced, few believed there was anything left to say. Stallone was past 70. The world had changed. But the man who created Rambo refused to let him fade quietly. Fact Hashone 5. Rambo. Last Blood, 2019. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a funeral march. Critics called it cruel, regressive, unnecessary. Stallone called it closure. The film doubled its budget at the box office and became the unspoken epilogue to a franchise that started with sorrow, not patriotism. The twist? Last Blood wasn't made for everyone, it was made for those who still remembered the silence after First Blood. It wasn't supposed to work, but it did because endings, like soldiers, don't always follow orders. Bonus fact: Equilibrium, 2002. Every era has a film that's misunderstood in its own time. Equilibrium was one of them. Released quietly in 2002, it looked like a Matrix imitation. Black coats, guns, dystopia. But underneath the surface was something stranger, a meditation on the price of peace and the danger of perfection. In a future where human emotion is outlawed, art is banned, and obedience is absolute, Christian Bale plays a man who enforces order until he begins to feel again. His rebellion doesn't start with a revolution, it starts with a tear. The production was modest, the director unknown, and the concept too cerebral for mainstream audiences. Critics dismissed it as pretentious. The studio barely marketed it. The US release earned less than $1 million, but like the emotions it tried to suppress, Equilibrium refused to die. Over the years, it became a cult treasure, whispered about in forums, rediscovered by fans who saw its precision, its stillness, its haunting rhythm. The film's signature invention, the gun kata, a martial art blending geometry with gunfire, was born not in a lab or a dojo, but in director Kurt Wimmer's living room. He imagined gunfights as choreography, as mathematics, as faith. It didn't need fame, it needed time. 2 decades later, Equilibrium stands as proof that silence can echo louder than spectacle. A film built on control, found freedom only through failure. Sometimes, the movies that vanish the fastest are the ones that linger the longest. So now the question is, why do the impossible films stay with us longer than the perfect ones? Was it the accidents, the desperation, or the madness that pushed these stories beyond reason? From El Mariachi's $7,000 Miracle to The Matrix's Digital Awakening, each of these films defied not just Hollywood, but gravity itself. They weren't made to inspire, they were made to survive. And maybe that's why they matter. Tell us, which of these doomed ideas do you think deserved to fail, but didn't?